Hi, welcome to Pediatric Speech Sisters Live. Give me one moment here. How's everybody doing and where are you tuning in from? I am currently in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. So that is right outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma, where I was born and raised. And the weather's kind of cold, but I'm excited because we're in the springtime. And even though I was born in the winter, the spring is like my favorite season. I can't stand the cold. So even though y'all will be seeing me at ASHA this year in Boston with my big coat, um, you might hear me say some complaints. Just FYI. Okay, so today's episode is about why I joined the field of speech language pathology. The reason why I am talking about this, one, is to reintroduce myself. I am so thankful to have expanded the Pediatric Speech Sister community. I'm so proud and just so thankful of how far it's gone, and just to know that there are other speech pathologists here in the mission. Okay, so I just wanted to make sure I have my comments up. All right, so as a reintroduction, my name is Melanie White Evans. I am a pediatric speech language pathologist. I'm currently in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I'm licensed to practice in Oklahoma and Texas, but I actually started my journey in this field in Washington, D.C., which I'll be talking about. Even though I started, or even though currently a speech pathologist now, it didn't start that way. Although I had my roots in speech pathology. I had a speech pathologist when I was a 3-year-old. I was actually a late talker. And even though I had a speech pathologist from 3 years old up until 3rd grade, I didn't think about it being my actual profession until I got to college. So this whole reintroduction is also based off of a passion project I'm working on. I'm working on a few, but two major ones is Introduction to Cultural Compatibility in Speech Pathology that will be coming out in July, and also 5 ways to support Black and Brown children in clinical and academic settings. That will also be coming out this year in 2023. I'm extremely excited about that. The reason why I joined the field in a nutshell is to close the academic achievement gap. And I'll be talking a little bit about my journey to get to that point today. If you are joining, please go ahead and drop in the chat where you're coming from. I am recording from a service on YouTube Live. It might say how to set boundaries for SLP praxis success. Let me actually change that now. I don't know why it said that. Why I joined speech pathology. There we go. Okay, now we're back. All right. So as I go through today, please feel free to ask me any questions about myself. I love to interact with you all and just kind of see where you all are at in your careers too. Everyone seems to be at a national convention or at a state board convention right now. I know that in Basel is happening. I know that Grad SLP was in Jersey. There's like a Jersey state convention. So it's kind of convention weekend right now. Very excited, a little jealous. I wish I could be out there with you all. But I just went to Yosemite, so I had to kind of pick and choose where I was going, and it was going to be a national park. So the U.S. Department of Education and Justice wrote an article to the CRDC. And the reason why they wrote the article to the CRDC is because they recognize that the CRDC makes up 35% of students suspended once. 35% of African American students are suspended at least one time. 44% of those suspended more than once, and 36% of students expelled. So, although Black kids represent 15% of the CRDC, they're making up 35% of students suspended once, 44% of those suspended more than once, and 36% of students expelled. Further, over 50% of students who were involved in school-related arrests or referred to law enforcement are Hispanic and Black. So I, of course, did not know this going into college. I'm actually amazed of my journey to becoming a speech pathologist. I originally started as a broadcast journalism major with hopes to change the world. Although I still plan to do that, I decided to change the world with my own spin. I joined the world I joined the field looking at dollar signs, which everybody was, don't lie. Everybody saw how much they can come out making. Of course, I wanted to help people. That's always something I've wanted to do with myself and with my career. But when I saw how much I can come out of grad school making, I'm like, well, hey, this is definitely a field for me. And so one thing I realized that there is a significant gap in the education system. And here's what I mean. This journey toward racial justice started in 2016 when I joined the United Negro College Fund as a Walton K through 12 Education Reform Fellow. If you're familiar with UNCF, please give me a thumbs up. They're an incredible nonprofit organization, pretty much geared towards advancing Black people in academic systems. Follow UNCF on Instagram. I got to intern with them too. They're an incredible organization. And as a Walton Fellow, I received a stipend to work in operations at a charter school in the South Side of Chicago. So, although I enjoyed working alongside the administrative team, I was disgusted to see the founder's attitude towards the kids in the school. And here's just an example. So, at first, I kind of admired her. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, you're great. You're very wealthy, and here you are in the South Side of Chicago. You are seemingly progressive. You have a whole charter school geared towards serving Black children in the South Side of Chicago. Hats off to you." Well, but then when I noticed that I was talking to my colleagues there who were working in the admin staff and the teachers. And also, when I would observe this founder, I remember I saw a child, and the child was walking down the stairs and like tripped and fell. And the founder was walking up the stairs and just kind of looked and kept walking. And I guess kind of decided that a teacher should tend to that child. And even though maybe some people listening to this might think that that's just a small case. Um, it's not, because really, if your heart is in it, and if you see a child, something as small as seeing a child fall at a school that you built and created, you're going to make sure that that child can at least get up before walking past. So that was just one thing. I'm going to be mentioning a few, but overall, I realized that she was all about the Benjamins. She didn't really care about the kids she was serving, even though the free and reduced lunch programs were there. Um, Still wasn't enough. Here's another great example. It was head count day, where attendance counted and the number of heads determined the amount of funding they received. From a business perspective, I understand the angst when children decide not to show up to school that day. What bothered me as a fellow at the time was that the founder ordered the teachers to hop in their cars, go to the child's house, and pick them up so that way they can get their heads counted. So that bothered me too, because I'm like, well, why isn't that a normal thing? So if you are really concerned about the child not being at school, how often are they absent? And give me a moment, y'all, because someone's calling. All right. All right, y'all, that's my bestie. So anyway, my thing is, why weren't you concerned about this before? Why weren't you concerned about these kids not showing up to school before? Why are you waiting until it's head count day? And also, if the child is gone sick, why would you go to their house to pick them up if they're sick? If they're sick. And this is before COVID, but nonetheless, It made me feel sick inside. So that same year, I joined other students in Howard University's alternative spring break program, hopped on a bus to New Orleans from Washington, D.C. to serve the education reform and prison industrial complex initiatives. So in a year, I found how woefully undiscussed the academic achievement gap is and how it particularly impacts Black and Latinx populations. I also learned the reality of the school to prison pipeline, how many multicultural students from underserved communities were doomed in the United States due to inequitable lack of resources, family support, the fact that cities didn't even pay attention to these communities or make accessible access to quality care. I think about the charter school, just going back to the Chicago Collegiate Charter School, didn't mean to mention their names. But just going back to the charter school there, it is a very nice charter school in Chicago. I lived in Halstead Avenue, right across from the University of Illinois, Chicago campus. If you're familiar with the downtown area, you'll know that that is a very nice area. There is a Cold Stone up the street, which made me very happy. But let me tell you about my commute. So, and mind you, this is my junior year of college. So I would walk, me and my roommate would walk to the bus, take the bus to the train station, get on the green line to transfer to the red line, and then take the red line all the way down to my stop, which was 116 far. Get off that train, take another bus or to walk to another bus and then take a bus to a stop so I could walk the rest of the way to the school. So overall, that's like an hour, 15 hour and 30-minute trip just to get to school. For me, it was just to get to work, but just to get to school. And then you got to do it again on the way back. And Ubers were like $100. The reason why I'm mentioning all of this is because imagine kids who want to get out of that community and how difficult it is for them just to get out of the community. There's just a lot of barriers in place. So I'm sitting here in those disparities, and they really just weighed heavy on me. Another thing I noticed is that as I'm walking to the school, the grass is way high. The grass is like way high. I was nervous because I have really bad allergies. I didn't want to get bitten up. And so I noticed that where I was staying, where I was laying my head on Halstead Avenue, that grass was crisp, clean, pristine. Of course, they want to keep it nice for the students. They want to keep it nice for tourists and everything. But at the end of the day, it was clear that they weren't allocating their resources equitably, right? So I'm already programmed to think about ways that the academic achievement gap, the presence of underserved communities, and the issues its residents experience, and the inattention to the at-risk children, but yet they are being perceived as criminals as young as preschool age. So my dreams of changing the world became less of a broad statement and it became a lot more specific. I thought to myself, how could I ignore this fire in my spirit as a speech pathologist, especially one who has the capacity to work in the schools? So I didn't want to go into the classroom or be an educator in the traditional sense. I wanted to stay on my career path, my career track. So I decided to use my influence as a speech pathologist to target these disparities in the US K through 12 system. So thankfully, speech pathology has pillars geared around advocacy and cultural linguistic progress. So why not use my influence as a SLP to shift people's views of multicultural communication and advocate for the diverse students I knew I'd serve? So in 2019, as a second year graduate student at Howard, I started a research presentation with Dr. Valencia Perry, who was my professor at the time. She's my mentor now. And we planned to present at Mbasla that year, but of course, 2020 happened. So that didn't happen. But since that didn't happen, we decided to convert it to a research article for the ASHA Leader. This article was reviewed by our now president, Vicki Dale Williams, and she felt the article was so important that it became two published articles, one expanding our views on behavior in Black children and shifting the paradigm from disciplining Black children to cultural responsiveness, check out my link in bio on my Instagram for that, for those articles. And I will be starting a series soon on the podcast because I know that you do have to pay for Asha Leader. You might have to pay for Asha Leader. Not everyone has access to it. But the information in here is so invaluable that we need it. So I will be doing a series on this very soon. These articles include research and practical ways that SLPs can address exclusionary discipline and cultural mismatches in schools, including practicing cultural humility, employing culturally responsive approaches to service delivery, advocating for positive behavioral supports, and trying restorative practices. So that is my story about closing the academic achievement gap. Other things I'm interested in that I've received some questions about on Instagram is, of course, cultural competency, cultural compatibility, and also my language immersion. So I'll be talking about that. If you have any questions or any other questions that you want to ask me about my journey, or even just being a speech pathologist in general, please feel free to drop a question in the chat. I'll be happy to answer them for you. Let me talk about language immersion first, because that's the most exciting to me. So I got an opportunity to go to Guatemala as part of a Spanish immersion program. I was there for 3 months. I have no Spanish background once whatsoever. And this is where the cultural humility comes into play, or really the cultural compatibility comes into play, because I knew I wanted to continue to serve Spanish-speaking populations, Black and Latinx populations, but I really did not have a clear understanding of how to do that. So I felt that I was trained really well in my academic program as far as cultural responsiveness goes. And I did my clinical fellowship in Houston, Texas for that reason. They have a high, I think it's like 44% Hispanic population in Houston. So I knew that that would be a great way for me to learn and immerse myself in at least the American Hispanic communities, and continue to serve them there. But thank God I got the opportunity to be able to take that desire a step further and go to Guatemala and learn about Spanish speaking communities there, learn about their food, learn about their culture, learn their language. So I highly recommend Spanish immersion programs. That's how I am able to become a bilingual speech pathologist. Of course, it's a journey, not a destination. So I'm still taking Spanish classes. I plan on going to another Spanish speaking country at the end of the year, because Spanish, there are a whole bunch of different dialects in Spanish, not just one. So that is something that I'm excited to dig into. As far as cultural compatibility and how that's become a part of my path, I actually have to thank AC Goldberg at Transplaining. He reached out to me because he asked me to do a presentation for the anti-Black racism course that he has on the Credit Institute. Highly recommend checking that out. So I got to join a whole bunch of other brilliant speech pathologists, um, including JRC-SLP, Jordan Carroll. I know that Joanne, her last name is leaving me right now, but Beyond Babel, she's incredible. And also Amanda Pericle, she's also very incredible. Just some quick shout outs. But I got to join them and just talk about other ways that we can be anti-racist. So I chose to talk about Introduction to Cultural Compatibility. I low key didn't understand the assignment because because I do feel that I could have been a lot more specific as far as anti-Black racism goes, but at the same time, cultural compatibility is required to be anti-racist or to learn how to be anti-racist. So I was looking up different research articles that I can present on, and I actually saw something on the Informed SLP that AC co-signed. AC and Vivian TC co-signed, and Kiyomi Gregory co-signed. And it's about, am I qualified? So are you qualified to be treating these multicultural populations? And sadly, a lot of SLPs are simply just not qualified. And the way that we get qualified is by practicing cultural compatibility. So cultural compatibility is a mix of cultural humility and cultural competency put together. So pretty much you got to have the cultural desire, the cultural knowledge, the cultural understanding, all those things, and actually apply it. So not just watching a quick thing on TV about how to speak Spanish, but also applying it in the actual clinical setting. And so, if we're talking about anti Black racism and cultural compatibility, it's up to us and it's up to non Black speech pathologists to do the research and continue the conversation of the issues that are going on in the Black community, in the different communication styles going on in the Black community, and then applying that knowledge in the clinical setting. And so that goes into advocacy, and it also goes into how we interact with our colleagues, and it goes into how we interact with our students and their families, and it also goes into our interventions. So when I was saying interact, I was really meaning building relationships, but then also the actual intervention piece when we talk about treatment and assessment. So definitely check out that presentation, and I'll be writing a book on that. But did you have any questions for me? Anyone who is on live now, any questions for me about my journey as a speech pathologist? Just some quick things about my personal life. I went to Howard twice, graduated. I did end up moving back to Tulsa as part of that immersion program. So I got to be with family and born and raised here. I have a dog named Sir Duke who I love so much, and I locked him out of my room so that way he wouldn't come busting in during this conversation. But it's okay, he's with company. We have another dog here. But if that is it, if there are no other questions, I hope that everyone watches this and just really learn something today, especially about what we can do about the academic achievement gap. My goal here is just to empower more speech language pathologists to care about this topic. It is not talked about enough because we have on our clinical hats, and a lot of times academic achievement gap is more so an issue for educators, but I think it's an issue for us as well. So thank you all so much. If you want to connect with me, ask me any questions, contact me at Pediatric Speech Sister. And until then, I'll see you in the